Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through all of the Undertaker's matches at WrestleMania, from the beginning to the cinematic match with AJ Styles. This, of course, is Streak-A-Thon. And in this entry, the streak is over. This is, of course, his match with the Beast Incarnate Brock Lesnar, which took place on April 6, 2014, from the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, not the Silverdome, in New Orleans, at WrestleMania 30. Let the good times roll, as the tagline went. Good times roll indeed. It had an attendance of 60 to 65,000, depending on what source you want to believe. And it had a buy rate of 684,000, excluding WWE Network views, because this is when the network was very big with it. And I believe that's how I watched it, if I remember right. Now, this, like I said, is when the streak was broken, so a lot of infamy about that. Of course, we got a lot of good shots from it. This is where we get that one famous gif of the one fan in the front with the wide eyes, like... Now, there's a lot of back and forth about whether breaking the streak was a good idea or a bad idea. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I feel that if you were going to break the streak, you should have given it to somebody who could actually have used it. Like Punk could have gotten massive heel heat, waiting a couple years, giving it to Bray Wyatt. Heck, since he was one of the few people that actually beat Taker at Mania, waiting and having Reigns do it would have made a little bit more sense. Even though you wouldn't really get the return on investment for a couple more years, because Vince finally decided to use him right and turn him heel. However, even though they gave it to Lesnar, they did kind of turn things around, because while I was watching this match, I started to remember that before this, Lesnar was not being really used correctly in his second WWE run. I mean, he came back and they put him in the match with Cena only to have Cena win. And then he kept going back and forth with Triple H. And they exchanged wins a couple times. Other than that, without watching through everything, I can't remember any other stuff that Lesnar did. I mean, he made an impact with some of his stuff, but... I mean, that's where we get that one gif where he has the Kimura locked in and he's got that really big expression on his face, the meme look. Face That's where we get that. I think that was before this, but I mean, he wasn't treated as seriously as he was the first time. It's only in the aftermath of this where he started to be treated a little bit more. And I think part of that was that before that, Vince is using his usual, "Yeah, pal, you want to go to UFC? You want to become a real fighter? Then I'm crawling back. Oh, you'll pay some dues. You'll pay more dues." Or at least that's how it comes off to me. Because we all know the stories about how Vince can be very, very petty. Well, that's at least one return on investment they did, is that it got them to course correct and actually treat Lesnar like the serious threat he should have been used as. And of course, he won the WWE title in a squash match against Cena. Went on to have a tear. He had another little feud with Taker. And for the most part, the last decade since this, he's been treated seriously, even though the last couple of years he hasn't been used as much. Last couple of years, though, obvious reasons. I'm trying to remember when the last time he had a big match was. I think it was that WrestleMania I went to 2 years ago. At least that's the last big one I can think of that he was in. Of course, he had that good run. He was Farmer Brock and all that, coming down with the tractor, stuff like that, where he's really entertaining himself and entertaining us with it. Of course, for this match, the build-up was really good. It's how the starting of it is how you would expect with Taker's streak matches by this point. You know, he comes out, someone challenges him, and then the build-up is there. And it is mainly Heyman doing it, since he is Brock's mouthpiece, where he's all like, yes, he has put down many people, but none of them have been a beast incarnate like Brock. And that basically sums up the entire thing. And if you go into this feud knowing the history between these two, the matches they had, and Brock's first run when he was facing the American Badass, the Hell in a Cell, the No Contest, the Biker Chain match. If you go into that knowing it, it makes this match a little bit more strong. And you also look at it and be like, Lesnar won every match they had. He has Taker's number. That's when they were both younger, but Undertaker, being the older one, was younger, and now he's older. Lesnar is older too, but he's also more seasoned and he's had more battles. He faced opponents in different circumstances you could say are just as tough. And of course fighting his own body due to diverticulitis. So he is coming to put an end to the Undertaker, and I guess when it comes to the streak, he did. Like the previous year's Mania, this was the third match from the top. The last match, of course, being the world title match. Then you had the Divas match, which, with how long it went, you can definitely tell it was a buffer match, unlike the previous year. And then this match. It ran for about 25 minutes and 12 seconds, so a little bit longer than the previous years. But that's not counting entrances. Entrances, I'd say, it's probably about a good 10, 15-ish minutes, if not longer. The reason I go with that is that I was able to do 48 minutes of cardio when I was watching this. Now, I didn't start until maybe like 3 or 4 minutes on the bike. And then of course, trying to find it in the pay-per-view on the network. But even with that, I got to go from right at the beginning of the video package to just about the ending of the match before I got off. So that tells you how long this thing runs. So entrances might be closer to 20. Of course, you got Lesnar coming out with Heyman, their usual entrance. They're, of course, milking it because it's Mania. And then you have Undertaker coming out, and it's not an Undertaker WrestleMania entrance without it being super elaborate, and this is no exception. I love that you got the old-fashioned filter over footage of Taker at previous Manias, from his entrances to him vanquishing his opponents, and then the different audio bites that the commentators did. You got some Gorilla Monsoon there, you got Lawler, you got King. Lawler, King, they're the same person. You got JR, you got a bunch of good ones in there. All the good snippets. And then you got the coffins with the different numbers all around the entranceway with the fog coming out. Of course, Taker makes his entrance wearing his traditional jacket and his hat. And he got some like metal bling on there like you would see on belts. And as he comes out, there's a coffin to his left with 22 on it, and it opens. And while he's coming out, Taker is being stared down by Lesnar, and you can tell from how Lesnar's selling it, he's not intimidated by Undertaker in the slightest. Undertaker, gets to the ring, does the usual stare down, eyes and all that, takes his stuff off slowly, and we get to the match. It starts off hot for a moment, but then slowly cools down as these two are feeling each other out. And with how they're moving, you can tell that Lesnar and Undertaker, in real life, they definitely respect each other. But in the match aspect of it, you can tell they are feeling each other out. They're definitely not rushing in to face each other. We get what we expect. Them attempting their finishers early on. Taker trying to do a choke slam, Lesnar trying to do an F5, but doesn't work. They each avoid the other, showing that they definitely know each other well, even though it's been years since they've wrestled each other. And of course, they go out to the ring, and at least according to Wikipedia, when we get about 6 minutes in, Lesnar slams Taker onto the floor. This is where he got the concussion. I don't know if it's that or not. It could be that, but the spot that I felt it was a little bit after this, where Lesnar sent Taker into the guardrail. Well, it could have been that's when he started to feel it, because it's kind of almost a blink and miss it thing, but I noticed it is like when he's going past the steps, it looks like he kind of stumbles. It kind of looks to me like he might have caught the edge of one of the steps, but it could be he's also feeling the effects of the concussion, and then he lands weird after that. And then after that is when the match, you can definitely tell Taker something's wrong with him. Now before that, every time that Taker does something happens to him, you can tell he's selling it. And for a little bit after this, you're like, I can't tell if he's selling it or if he's actually suffered it. But then when they get to the thing where he's in the ropes, you're like, oh yeah, he suffered it. So whether it's one of that moment or that thing, or a combination of it, you can definitely tell Taker's had his bell rung. Now, going back into it, I thought I was going to hate the rest of the match following that part. But I don't really think this is that bad a match. I mean, compared to the matches they have afterwards and compared to the matches they had back in the 02-03 area, it's definitely the weakest, unless you're going to look at their first match and the fact it had a no contest finish. I guess in that regard, you can say that's probably their weakest. But it's still a decent match. It's only bad in comparison, I feel. And of course, compared to what it could have been if it wasn't for Taker having the stinger. But that into it, I'd say everything after that is still pretty good, even though there's a couple moments where you can definitely tell Taker's feeling it. And this is where I'm going to sidebar off of that real quick, because the thing I've mentioned loosely in the last ones is that from personal experience, I know how it feels to have a concussion. Now, for you constant viewers who have been watching me for years, you know back in 2011, me and my LARP friends were involved in a van accident against a tree when we went to an event up in Northern California. Obviously, we didn't make it to the event because of that. A lot of things in there, thankfully. No fatalities, just injuries to certain degrees. Now, while they didn't officially diagnose me with a concussion, they thought I might have had bleeding on the brain because of some things. Just looking at it, and from the fact that from before the accident to when I was in the hospital, I have no active memories other than maybe like vague things of yelling, and then the little thing in the ambulance and them putting the collar on me and then doing that, which is like a flash memory. I really have nothing that I can think of. Although I know I got out of the vehicle under my own power and at least called my grandmother, even though I didn't really say much. And of course I dropped my phone too. But for me to have done that means that I at least had some autopilot cognitive function. And that is scary enough to do that. Now, to go through the remaining part of a wrestling match and at least make it still serviceable, that I have to applaud Undertaker on that. It shows that he's a wily veteran, shows the muscle memory from his years of being in the ring, and even though at this point he's really only doing the one match a year, even with that, he has enough ring savvy, enough ring sense to be able to pull this off, and at least it makes the match as serviceable as it ends up being. Now, there are some parts where you can definitely tell they are going slowly in order for Taker to regain sense of himself. Like the moment I mentioned where they're against the ropes and Brock is doing little punches to the abdominal area, which makes sense given his UFC background now, but also makes sense because he's resting. Of course, Taker does manage to make a comeback. He gets some snake eyes and a big boot, drops a leg. Of course, we get the usual, them going for finishers. And they each do kick out of a finisher. I mean, Taker kicks out of at least 2 F5s throughout the course of the match, and Lesnar kicks out of a tombstone. I'm going to say, thankfully, they don't build it up like they did last time. We were like, no one's done that. Now they do have the shock look from Taker. But it's one of those things like, yeah, he shouldn't be surprised at this point that someone kicks out of at least one tombstone. The only thing they could be is that I believe this is the first time Taker's ever done a tombstone to Lesnar, because I know it's been ages since I've watched their first match and then their chain match, so I don't remember if he does there. But I know in the Hell in a Cell match he never got a chance to. He did a choke slam, he did a last ride, and Lesnar got out of both. One through a kick out, one through a rope break. And then when he was going for the tombstone is when Lesnar reversed it into an F5 that ended the match. Now, Taker gets him locked in the Hell's Gate twice. Now, I can remember from when I was watching this the first time, I knew that at least the first Hell's Gate Lesnar was going to get out of. So, not surprised then, not surprised now. And the way that Lesnar does, where he powers out of it by lifting it into a power bomb. Ooh, nice show of strength. Now, when he brings it down, he only brings it down slightly, which, given the fact that by this point everyone in the ring knows his bell's been rung, nice little way to protect Taker, but also, why lift it up more than necessary to break it? Just from a logic standpoint. Don't exert the energy this far into the match. And of course, Taker gets a second one on, and that's when I thought, Lesnar might actually tap, but nope, Lesnar got out of it. And of course, he gets the Kimura lock on him. And of course, Taker gets out of there because we know if the streak's breaking that Taker's not going to tap. He's not going to do that. And we finally get Lesnar countering an old school attempt. That goes into one of the F5s. Now, going back and forth, Taker does do a last ride on Lesnar, but it's a pitiful last ride, and I'm glad that they kind of cover up that for the most part with the camera angle. But even with that, you can tell this is more just a normal powerbomb. Which, speaking of camera angles, I had some weird thing pop up on it when I was watching it back, and that was that it went to black at least twice in a weird way. And I don't mean like the way where they do it to like cut something, but you still heard the audio. I mean, like if, let's say you're watching back an old episode of Raw or SmackDown, and it's the part where it goes to commercial, how it fades to black, and then it fades back in. Like that, and for no reason. For a pay-per-view, this makes no sense why we would do that. Unless there was something they couldn't figure out a way to edit it, or maybe it's something that Peacock didn't want on there. Either way, it's just weird. Anyway, after this last ride is where Taker does the tombstone for a near fall. And of course, he tries to go for a second one, and this results in Lesnar countering into the F5 that wins the match. Now, watching this and knowing it's coming, I was watching to see how everyone reacted just to double check it, because I feel the first time I watched it, I was a little shooken up because I'm like, oh my god, they actually ended the streak. And watching it back, you can really feel all the energy go out of the building. The only person that the energy is still there for is, of course, Paul Heyman, because he's being the advocate, and he's like, oh my god, yes! He's like super excited that Lesnar got the 3 count. Everyone else, though, you can really tell, like the referee a little bit, like he's like, oh crap, did I just mess up? Then of course all the cuts to the different parts of the crowd. I think you can see Saw Monster at one point in there. Of course, the one I mentioned was like, then of course cutting to the 21 and 1. Of course, you can see the crowd. It really is still real for them because they boo as Lesnar leaves, and as Taker gathers himself as they leave. And, they give him a standing ovation. Everybody, and I know this is the thank you Taker stuff. Taker earned that standing ovation. If there's anything that was done right, it was the fact that they respected Taker and gave him that standing ovation in defeat. Now, I gotta mention that the reason that he lost this night was apparently the day of Vince seeing him and being like, yeah, you gotta lose it tonight. Which, I'm like, yeah, no. Personally, I feel that they still could have gotten what they ended up getting out of this match by having Taker win still, but have it be a, hey, you won the battle but you lost the war type thing, either throughout the course of the match, even when you factor in the fact he got concussed during it. You could have it to where Lesnar beats the holy hell out of him to the point that, well, even though he lost the match to Undertaker, like let's say he gets him in another Hell's Gate and he has no choice but to tap, he beat him to within an inch of his life to where, like, if he comes back, oh, he's going to wish he hadn't. Kind of like that whole thing, like in the lead up to Hell in a Cell. Do you want your children to see a healthy daddy? Some type of that same vibe. It's like, yeah, your family will never see a healthy Taker again after this. And then, of course, that could have led a little bit into their feud later and explain why he decided to kick him in the dick. Why is he kicking me in the dick? Well, it's because you made him eat liquid food for 3 months. That's why, you jerk. But they didn't do that. Now, there's also the stories that after the match, once he got backstage, Taker collapsed, and Vince went to the hospital with him in the ambulance, which I got to applaud at least Vince a little bit for that. He's like going with one of his lead guys. Now, the thing I will take that back and give him the finger for is the fact that on the little documentary series that they did for Netflix, he said something to the effect that he doesn't believe Undertaker was concussed. Which, with that, I have this to say. Vince McMahon, fuck that puto. Fuck that puto. FTP for short. Now, not really much else to say about this match. The slow pace is especially later on, is mainly from the fact Taker got concussed, but I like that. Not the fact Taker got concussed, but the pace of it. I like how it allows the drama of the match to breathe a little bit. Now, because of the fact Taker got concussed, there's all He's going to be the what if about it, how this match could have been if it wasn't for that. But I feel like from an in-ring standpoint, it would have more or less been the same. It's just that there would have been parts where you would be looking at it and not know that Undertaker is concussed. Because after those two spots, there's a lot of moments where you can definitely tell he is concussed, where it's really affecting him. Like, like I mentioned, the last ride, and there's a couple other moments. So it's like a what if thing. But thankfully, this was not his last rodeo, either for Mania or in general. And of course, the following year, he would come back and have another Mania match. And like I mentioned, this is one of the ones where I feel would have been a better thing to end it. But this is a match that I remember thinking it was alright. If anything, we got that one good moment out of it where they stared each other down. And of course, that's going to be Taker versus Bray Wyatt. And that'll be next time. Till then, everybody.